Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second day of the EPALE Community Conference 2022. We had a fantastic day yesterday with lots of amazing interventions from our speakers and panelists, and today is going to be even better. Our focus for today is young adults. And of course, that immediately means we're thinking about linking into their energy, to their passion, to their commitment, to their ability to collaborate and network and work together. So today we're going to be exploring different aspects of that. And of course, young people are both the future of Europe and they're the people who have to live with the consequences of the decisions we make today for the longest period of time. So we're going to be exploring the role that young adults have in our society and how education opens up new opportunities for them. We're delighted that there's 120,000 people on the EPALE platform, and we know that we're growing. And in order to interact with our speakers and to ask questions to our panelists, you have to have an account on EPALE. You need to register and log in. So there's another opportunity for you to do it. Throughout, we are broadcasting live on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Facebook. So you can ask questions and you can interact with us there. And we love to hear from you. In fact, we particularly want you to use the hashtag #ImagineEPALE. You can share your selfies, your pictures, your drawings, your notes, your messages. We want to encourage you over these 3 days of the community conference to really let your imagination go and explore how we can imagine different futures. So if you're inspired by something that you've heard, if you want to engage with us, please send us something through that. And to make life easier, we've actually got a special app that you can download, and it's available both for the Android and for the Apple environment. So please download the EPALE mobile app. It has lots of different opportunities to engage and be part of it. Yesterday, I told you that we have 17 national support services through the EPALE network that have chosen to hold either live screenings or specific events linked to our community conference. And we were really excited yesterday to connect live into colleagues from Austria, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and from Slovakia. Today, we're going to be turning to the north of Europe and we're going to be connecting in with Finland in a second, and we'll have a chance to hear what they're doing and how they're doing it. I'm delighted to say hello to colleagues from Finland. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Greetings from sunny Helsinki. I am Alma Smolander and I worked at EPALE Finland as an advisor.
And I'm Riitta Vepsäläinen and I'm currently doing my internship and it's partly with EPALE.
And we are located at the Finnish National Agency for Education. And today, here with us, we have a group of students of education who will follow the conference with us.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, lovely to see you all.
I'm Elli. I'm here as a student, and here's also other students with me here. I study at Tampere University, education there, and I'm also doing my internship here at the Finnish National Agency of Education. So, yeah.
Thank you, Elli.
And we are looking forward to an interesting and thought-provoking day. And also thank you for all the organizers of this conference.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to the team from Helsinki. How lovely it is to see the faces of the national support services as we move around Europe. So that's excellent. Thank you so much. And I know we'll be checking back with Helsinki a little bit late in our program. So have a good morning.
Bye.
So let's come back to our theme, which is young adults. How do we engage them? How do we reach out to them? How do we support them? How do we create space and opportunity to allow them to bring their ideas and their enthusiasm into our decision making and into our societies? So to start our conversation, we have an amazing keynote speaker, and I'm delighted to be introducing to you Elaida Eskitaşioglu, who is a young activist with an extraordinary range of experience. So I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to invite her to introduce herself and tell us why she's a youth activist and why she wants to change the world. Elaida, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Thompson, and a good morning to all. I'm really excited to be a part of EPALE Community Conference this year. I'm welcoming and saluting you all with my cup of coffee from a very cloudy morning in Istanbul. I truly feel like this is not the huge conference it is, but it's actually an informal chat among friends. And I feel quite secure and really excited for the discussion we will be having today. I'm hoping to give just a glimpse of my insights about the work that I do as a youth activist, and some of my thoughts on what meaningful youth engagement can look like in the way forward towards sustainability. And I can't think of a better crowd, actually. It's a community full of passionate people who care about education, community, with hopes for the future. So I'm really pumped up, as you can see. Let me first of all give a brief introduction to our participants in the conference, who I am, what I do, and which hats I'm bringing in today. I'm currently a PhD student, a PhD researcher at Koç University in Istanbul, Turkey. I study international human rights law, so I'm a lawyer actually, an attorney at law at Ankara Bar Association, but I'm currently doing my research and writing my PhD thesis. I'm a fellow at UNESCO Chair for Sustainable Development and Gender Equality, and I serve as one of the 17 young leaders which United Nations choose for Sustainable Development Goals. We're called the Young Leaders for the SDGs. And my biggest hat that I have on today, and hopefully I'll be talking a little bit about that as well, I'm the co-founder of an NGO named We Need to Talk. We fight against period poverty and menstruation stigma in Turkey and throughout our region. So let me start a little bit with how I decided to work on this area, why I care for menstrual justice, and what I do as a youth activist for sustainable development. How did this story begin? So in order to go to the beginning of everything, we have to go back to the year 2011. I was 18 years old then, and there was a big earthquake in my hometown, Van. Which is in the eastern part of Turkey. The magnitude was huge. It was 7.2, with waves of aftershocks, and more than 600 people lost their lives, unfortunately, leaving behind thousands of injured and homeless people. It's a beautiful province, and it's where my father was born. I truly care about our community there. So once we recovered from the initial shock, me and my family, we immediately started to prepare these little aid boxes that we can send over to the disaster zone. Even though I have a quite matriarchal family, so I have a lot of strong women in my family, none of us actually thought of putting sanitary pads or tampons into those boxes. How odd, I thought later. We never talked about it, even though we were a crowded group of women from all ages. We never thought about it as if we do not bleed, as if we would stop menstruating all of a sudden when there was a natural disaster. We were taught completely to shut down, never talk about that experience, and experience all the pain and confusion quietly in the dark. How incredibly odd. Once we realized that we forgot the essential products, we immediately sent more packages, but the way we were thinking actually stuck in the corner of my mind. A couple of years later, when I started law school, I came across a tweet in social media. The Turkish Language Institute had updated its dictionary, and they added a new definition to the word kirli, which means dirty or impure in Turkish. The added definition was a woman who's menstruating. Now, think how a small child reading that definition would feel about their bodies, about a very natural biological experience that awaits them. That is when I had my eureka moment, and I decided to do something about it. I started to relentlessly research about menstruation. By the way, this is not only a specifically Turkish experience. We do know period poverty and menstruation stigma is still a huge problem all over Europe. So I decided to do something about it, and I founded We Need to Talk back in 2016. And quite soon after, my partner and co-founder Bahar joined me. We fight against period poverty and menstruation stigma, and we're especially trying to reach out to menstruators who are experiencing period poverty and the stigma especially 3 vulnerable groups: seasonal agricultural workers, the Syrian and Afghan refugee and migrant communities, and the children who are going to schools in remote rural areas. We organize field projects. We have informative, educative menstrual care sessions about puberty, about menstruation, about our bodies with volunteer doctors, of course. We hold Q&A sessions, and most importantly, we create safe spaces in which we can honestly and openly talk about menstruation. That is where our name comes from, actually. I know it sounds a bit weird. We need to talk. It sounds like the first sentence of a very awkward breakup talk. But this is exactly what we want. We want to talk about things that no one wants to talk about, because we believe, with my co-founder Bahar, talking is the first step towards destroying stigma. We've also realized there was a severe lack of content for menstruation education in Turkey, and we decided to create content which is suitable for the local context that can tackle experiences of menstruators who do not often have access to menstrual products, but also some basic facilities and resources like safe, clean water, clean toilets, safe spaces, correct information, training, and information in general. So we have also decided to collect and publish our data and research, and because we believe in the power of storytelling, just as I'm doing now, we've even written a children's book which focuses on the first period experience. As you can see, I'm the period lady. I'm quite passionate about menstrual justice, but it is one cause that we chose with my co-founder Bahar. We're very passionate about it. We're working on it, and we're hoping to transform this particular aspect in our community. It is important to know that building a just society and a sustainable future is an ocean, and it's quite easy to get lost and lose hope too. So it's quite helpful, in my opinion, to start small, start local, and choose more specific paths, while constantly looking for ways to support and to be in solidarity with others who are making change in different realms of life in their communities. So based on my experiences as the co-founder of this NGO, and also as a young activist, as a lawyer, I've started to think and advocate on an issue that is very near and dear to my heart. I decided to look at how I was able to start this little change, make a transformation happen in my society. And I decided to passionately work for applying that to the whole sustainability agenda. I'm really passionate and excited about meaningful youth engagement, which I think perfectly fits to the theme of today, young adults. We could have hours and hours of discussion, of course, about how to build a diverse and inclusive society for an equitable future, but I don't think we will have enough time for that. But I want to focus on one aspect of diversity and inclusion, which we often forget or undermine. It's intergenerational solidarity. It's quite simple, but it's often forgotten and really, really crucial to actually start a change. Intergenerational solidarity, diversity, and representation really matters. And it's truly important to raise young voices for a better future. We always talk about how young people are our future, but we see them as the leaders of tomorrow, not of today. And we really need to change that mindset, in my opinion. A majority of you, I think, are familiar with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are also named as the Global Goals, a collection of 17 interlinked global goals designed to be kind of a blueprint for peace and prosperity for our people and planet. We have an approaching deadline, of course. Some of you may know that United Nations have determined these 17 goals, and we have the deadline of 2030, which is quite close and around the corner. We have an approaching deadline, and we have 8, almost 7 years. And we had this huge setback of the global pandemic that we have never seen before, at least in our generation. So another challenge I've been observing with this huge, seemingly impossible task and this approaching deadline is this obsession over the idea of sustainability and inclusiveness and diversity as a trend, which couldn't be further than the truth. Transforming our lives towards sustainability and working for diverse society is our only choice for the future. It's definitely not a trend. And also, sustainability is not an exclusively green agenda. It's not only about fighting the climate crisis. We also need to consider the people aspect of our future and not to undermine the social justice perspective, as poverty and gender-based violence and modern slavery and violation of children's rights are unfortunately on the rise. Now, I know I've painted a very, very dark and pessimistic picture, painting, but that's definitely not what we're here for. One solution, in my opinion, for this seemingly impossible task is building intergenerational solidarity and working for meaningful youth engagement. Now we see that young people are pushing decision makers to not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk. And we're asking for more than mere good intentions. We're asking for accountability from our leaders, for investment, and for concrete plans. I have to recall the famous words of Kofi Annan. "You're never too young to lead and never too old to learn," he said. This is indeed quite inspiring and encouraging in my opinion. But how can we do this? How can we truly and meaningfully include the youth perspective? Maybe one way to start is to know what not to do. I want to give a fair warning against tokenism. Youth inclusion is a very serious commitment, but it is much more than inviting a young person to a panel or a fancy summit every once in a while, or sprinkling some young people over a conference or a panel just to check boxes. It's much more than that. And I believe EPALE Community Conference is a very good practice for inclusive community building because, as we have seen from our amazing colleagues from Finland, there are passionate people from many different generations who are discussing and building ideas together. This is what meaningful intergenerational community building should look like. We have to simply take a look into our offices, the decision-making boards we're a part of. It may be your local municipality, or it can be the board of your elementary school. Are young people truly included as we're making decisions? Or are they simply told and notified of the decisions that we have made for them? How many young people do you see in your rooms and offices? And if there are they actually given time and space and opportunity to express their points of view? Or are they the interns taking notes or setting meetings, or students who are simply expected to stay quiet? Having this constantly questioning set of mind while entering every single room is a brilliant first step towards meaningful youth engagement and being a true ally to young people. I know intergenerational solidarity is easy to say, but it's actually challenging to make a reality. I can understand 100%. I'm from the millennial generation. They call us zillennials as well. So we're from millennial generation, but close to the age of Gen Z. I sometimes have trouble understanding the social media trends my Gen Z sister is talking about. Sometimes we may speak different languages as generations from time to time, I have to admit. And it can be challenging and it can require serious structural changes and getting out of our comfort zones. But young people's dynamism and energy are definitely worth the challenge. Years ago, in a conference in Senegal, I listened to Aya Chebi, who was the former youth envoy of African Union. And she said this wonderful thing. When young people promise, young people deliver, she said. It's really important to give young people a chance and believe in them. When they promise, they deliver. I couldn't agree more with these white words. I promise I will always keep including younger voices in our collective fight for menstrual justice. And I'm hoping that the amazing participants of this conference today can join this promise too. Thank you so much for listening. I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of the work that I do and some thoughts. And I'm looking forward to discussing and hearing your questions. Thank you so much, Thompson. Back to you.
Thank you, Elida. I really enjoyed listening to you. Obviously, your passion and your commitment comes through, but also the ability to think strategically and link, the big global SDGs and also what's happening at the very local level. And I really enjoyed hearing how your process of awakening started from the fact that you questioned, hang on, why did I not automatically think about providing sanitary products in the aid packages I was thinking of, and how that opened a new conversation. I wonder if you can sort of build up a little bit more the idea. You said we've got to have meaningful youth engagement, and it's true. There's a lot of tokenism. Say, here's the young person in the room, and they will provide input on all young voices. But young people are very heterogeneous, as you say. Even within different generations, there are things. How do you think young people, if they're given the space, will make a difference? What do you think they want from our society and from our world that is different from the generations before them?
I wish I had hours and hours to discuss that, honestly, Thompson. It's a really, really difficult and challenging question. Maybe I should write my PhD thesis on that. But basically, what I think they will bring in is young people, Gen Z, and also the Alpha generation, who are even younger than them, will be experiencing challenges that we have never experienced before. And unfortunately, the heritage that we're giving them, the world that is given to them, the state of things, are not ideal. It's definitely worse than ideal. And they've also, by the way, started to challenge these experiences right now. They do not have to wait until they're adults to see the effects of climate crisis, or see the effects of our declining economies, or the increasing intolerance towards feminist movements, for example. They've already started experiencing them, and they've started to create these defense mechanisms that they use. They know in a better way how to build more diverse and more inclusive societies. So I think these are some of the talents that they can teach us, for sure, and they can actually be the best people who can discuss the problems that they are experiencing, and they will be experiencing in the future. So it's definitely a fresh perspective that we need to put in. And by the way, it's really important to start building this transformed culture into our decision-making mechanisms right now, because we of course know that systems take year and year to actually evolve and truly accept a multilateral and intergenerational dialogue mechanisms. So it is truly time to include these younger perspectives now, so that we can be sure maybe 20-30 years later we will be able to have meaningful youth engagement a reality. I'm very sorry. I know this is a very very superficial answer, but it's the best I can give in a minute or so.
Well, in that case, let me ask you one last point, which is, as you know, the EPALE community is the educators who are involved in this. If there's one message you'd like to give adult educators who are working with young people, what would you like them to do or to think about so that they could act as an incubator for young people to feel empowered and like they have a chance to change things? What's the message that you want to give the educators?
One message I want to give educators. One thing is, I know, especially the participants right here, if you weren't passionate about the future of young people and a sustainable future, you probably wouldn't be here. And I'm pretty sure you're always open to hear ideas of young people. But we do not know the challenges that they go through. And especially youth is, I mean, I still haven't figured out everything yet, of course. Who am I to give you advices? But the thing is, sometimes instead of waiting to hear for ideas, it's helpful to simply reach out and ask for their opinions and ideas, to initiate the conversation yourself, instead of waiting for young people to initiate movements or ideas. Simply, when making a decision, think about your students or the young people you work with in your communities, and go ahead and ask yourself to integrate their ideas into your decisions and movement. So make the first move would be my first message to the amazing educators in this conference.
Thank you. And we've had a question in from somebody called Martina, and I think it's more of a comment really. She says that activism requires passion, bravery, dedication, and credibility. However, activists sometimes get judged more about their sort of personality or their looks rather than their battles and their ideas. Is this something you've come across as a young advocate, that often you'll be judged on the fact that you're young or you're a woman rather than the content of your messages?
Of course, I mean, who hasn't? I definitely had some dark memories from the times where, for example, I clearly remember there was this field project that we had in southeastern Turkey where some elderly men actually physically chased us because they thought the session, the educative session that we were holding, was immoral and was inappropriate. They physically chased us, and at that point I had to make a choice. We either would leave the village, or we would have an honest and open discussion with them. We chose to stay in the village because we knew that the community in that village actually truly needed the menstrual products. We did something that was not ideal. We actually hid the menstrual products in little bags, and we distributed it like that, as if they were illegal drugs. I know that it was actually contradictory to our core goal, because we were hiding the menstrual products, but we still wanted to ensure the safety of the community, ensure the safety of the young activists that were working with me. I was really nervous about their safety, and also make sure that we had the community provided with the necessary products and information. So we're sometimes pushed to make those tough decisions. There have been times in which we were physically chased. There have been times in which the founders of some menstrual product brands who actually tried to mansplain menstruation to us menstruators. There have been times like that where I experienced that as a young woman, not only as a young person, but also as a young woman, I think. But the important thing is to get back to your community and see the transformation and the change that you have made. It's important to get the strength from amazing people who believe in your movement, who believe in your cause, and to pick your battles from time to time. It's truly not always possible to be the bravest and to be able to complete every mission the way you have imagined it to be. So you have to be flexible, and you should, I think, grow a thick skin for times like this.
Thank you very much. And that fits very nicely with what we heard yesterday. Our keynote speaker yesterday was encouraging us to accept that there will be periods of discomfort. To leave your comfort zone means, going through periods of discomfort, connecting with our senses, but then moving to a transformational position. So thank you for sharing your story and your journey today. That was really wonderful and inspiring. And I really hope that in the future, there'll be less chasing away of what you do and more welcoming in, so that the community can receive your messages. Thank you very much, Elida, for sharing your youth activism journey.
Thank you
We're
so much.
about Thank you. We're going to have, in a few moments, we're going to start the next session, which is going to be coffee and conversation. And that's my coffee that's just arrived next to us. So thank you very much to Elida, and we will go live with our conversation in 2 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Apologies, I had my microphone on mute. We're now going to have a session called Coffee and Conversation, and we're going to explore young adult participation and citizenship. And I have a few members of the panel who I'll introduce in a few seconds, but I just wanted to invite you to relax, get yourself a cup of coffee, because this is a conversation that we would like to have with you, with the audience. As a reminder, you can interact with us by putting questions or comments using the EPALE platform, so you need to register and make sure you're on there, or also by engaging with us on social media. So we want to explore what does that actually mean. And Elida gave us a great introduction to her journey as a youth activist, the difficulties and challenges along the way, but how much it can transform and engage people. And we're going to pick that up again in this conversation. So joining me on the panel to discuss this, I have Javier Rambla, who's the Associate Professor of Sociology at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Welcome, Javier. We have Hanna Toivonen, who's the Professor of Adult Education at the Faculty of Education and Culture of Tampere University. Hello again to Finland. And we have Biljana Sirakova, the Policy Officer and Youth Coordinator of the European Commission for the Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. Welcome to Biljana. Hello to all of you. So I'm going to start, I think, with Biljana, because 2022 is the year of youth. This is the year where there is the most amount of political attention, focus and support for young people. And participation of young people is clearly one of the key objectives on that. Why is it so important that we give young people not just a look into the door and a seat at the table, but an active role in decision-making processes?
Thank you very much, Tamsin, for this question. I'll start maybe just the answer a bit more broadly with why is participation in general important, because that's the case for all our citizens. And I'll then mention why, particularly for young people. But I think we all know how often our democracy is under threats, and this is definitely currently the state. And threats can be external, but also internal in terms of, extremism, populism. And it is so important that all of our citizens are engaged and that they vote, they participate in decision-making in democracy. And this is also the case for, of course, efficiencies and so that we can have optimal policies and solutions brought up. And I also want to mention in that context that more and more we are working with citizens, and the Conference on the Future of Europe, which was a one-year process that took place, featured that. And by the way, yesterday, the European Commission published its work program for next year, 2023, and 4 out of the 5 program initiatives are actually linked to what citizens recommended in the conference. So you can see that this participation of citizens and involvement is very critical, and I think it is a trend that has been happening over some years now. And then when we come to young people, this is also the case. I mean, youth participation is a priority, like you said, it's in our EU strategy, in all of our programs like Erasmus+, and it has been growing stronger and stronger over the years. And there are many reasons why youth participation is important, but I'll just mention maybe 3. So firstly, we, as said, this is really a win-win situation where for our efficiency in order to come up with proposals and policies and strategies that make sense, that are optimal, we want to involve young people, get their buy-in. So this is one thing. Of course, this is also their rights. So we have this rights-based approach. You have a right to be involved in the decisions that ultimately impact you, or in the decisions that ultimately you will inherit. So this is a right. There is another reason, which is quite your community, this adult learning community will understand, and it's development. I think by involving young people and with this participation, they are developing skills and competencies. Because, when they turn 18 or maybe 16 in some countries, we expect them to vote, to have critical thinking, to make decisions. But this is a longer term process before that. So, for instance, citizenship education and developing the skills has to be there from the start. And final point, really, we think that when we involve young people in the processes, we also get better solutions. I mean, I talked about efficiency, but it's also this effectiveness. We have, and the previous speaker was a wonderful example of that. They are passionate, they have great original and innovative solutions and ideas. So it does make sense to evolve them in the processes in order to get that benefit and diverse perspective.
Thank you. And I think you're right in the sense that we expect young people at quite arbitrary age, say 16 or 18, to then suddenly to be able to step up and vote or join the army or make really big life decisions. But as you say, it's a process. And I'm just struck by the fact that my kids are 7 and 9, and in their school, so really at very young age in primary school, they have a class council and are given the opportunity to put forward suggestions and to vote. And so you can start this process really quite young. It isn't something that has to happen later. It's part of a continuum of activities, giving young people a voice and an opportunity to influence the world they have around them.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can mention really quick, Tamsin, we have, this community will know, competence frameworks for different things. And in the Commission, we have also launched, a green competency framework, digital competency framework, digital for educators, etc. So I think what we need probably is also a citizenship competence framework. Again, it's not only for young people, for all our citizens. What does it mean to be engaged citizen? I mean, voting, okay, we said that example, but there is a lot more to that. And nowadays, there are also unconventional ways to participate, from social protests and movements to, using social media and other tools. So there is a lot there. And maybe just a quick plug-in. This Thursday and Friday, we have the 4th Public Participation and Deliberative Democracy Festival at the European Commission. And your audience, if they're interested to follow this topic, can also join in maybe on Friday. And youth participation is also going to be a theme of that Democracy Festival.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we can find a link and put it in the chat, because people may well be interested in joining in. Javier, let me turn to you, because there's sort of a predominant narrative about in our current societies about the way that people's life paths should go ahead. This idea that you should get an education, then a job, then a mortgage, buy a house, create a family. There's a pathway that seems to be set out. And this is the aspiration that we offer young people who might have a very different view of what they want from life. They might want a radical rethink of these assumptions and frameworks. You've done quite extensive research on this topic and young people's ideas. How do you think that policies on lifelong learning feel meaningful for young people?
Thank you. Our life, certainly our life is not linear. We live we have several experiences at the same time. However, we have organized a kind of a sort of institutional life course that follows a clear sequence, which is basically patterned by an array of institutions such as education and training, or the labor market, and social protection. The youth are living in a moment where they are in transition between some of these institutional positions, but they find that this transition is increasingly complex. In some cases, it's difficult to say when it starts and when it finishes. So in this sense, they are learning from a very different perspective as the one that we take for granted when we think about schools. Children live in a school for a number of hours a day, and learning is a sort of everyday experience for them there. This is not the case when we look at all the people, particularly young adults. For young adults, learning has to do with their biography. It's a very crucial biographical moment. They have to learn what the specialties or the techniques they are studying, but they are also have to link this learning with their life plans, and this is one of the key issues. Actually, if adult education and learning, or higher education or vocational education, are to be sustainable somehow, they have to bridge the objective of formal teaching and learning with this meaningful life plans that people, particularly young people, are elaborating when they engage in learning. So this is an important issue that policies have to take into account.
Thank you. Do you think, the policies that are set often, and we heard yesterday that our education tends to be focused on mastery. In other words, can you do this? Here's a skill you have to be able to do before you leave school or university or college. Have you done it? Yes or no? And we were invited to reflect on something called depth education, which would be a little bit more about your ability to understand and to move and to develop things rather than a tick box to say you can do this set of things. I wonder if, Javier, if you could build a little bit on this. You talked about transitions and that we need to link the learning pathway with people's life plans. How does that ambition fit with the need to develop a curriculum in advance that might need to be signed off or fit with something set by an education ministry? How do we make the link between the kind of flexibility you spoke about, Javier, and the need to have an agreed curricula of a certain quality and standard that meets the criteria for being accredited?
Yes, actually, this is not so difficult in compulsory education because actually the curriculum in compulsory education already takes into account citizenship education and other aspects that can help young people or future adult people to live a meaningful life. I think that but of course, this is not an easy task. Teaching is not an easy task at all. The profession requires quite a lot of to master quite a variety of instruments. This is also a political issue. Actually, there are political contentions about the content of the school curriculum everywhere. I think it's difficult to find an exception in Europe and throughout the world at this moment. However, besides this issue, the importance of compulsory education, the challenges are also very important and maybe bigger when we think of further post-compulsory or adult education. How can policies bridge this gap in these areas? What many researchers are commenting right now, and I agree with this view, is that then we have to take recognition into account. It's important that education and training programs acknowledge the plans and the projects of young people. This has been one of the clues of the innovative second chance schools in some southwestern European countries where early school living is a huge problem. When young people find that they are recognized, that they can do something that is personal for them, they easily engage with learning again. In Central European countries, some apprenticeship skills actually have tried to develop similar approaches, although with a different methodology. They have tried to engage young people with which are living very diverse circumstances, with some sort of work place, learning and teaching, and are meaningful for them in very different ways. So I think that this is one of the key issues and one of the key challenges. We also, policymakers and actually the civil society representatives also have to be aware that despite the importance of these huge challenges, we are also facing another very important one. Because at this moment, many young people are coming to Europe. They are arriving at different ages, and depending on their legal status, they find some important barriers to engage in education and training. And it's very important that policymakers and actually that we take this issue into account when we introduce it into the democratic debate, because unless we broaden the basis and we have everybody in the conversation, it will be very hard to develop some sustainable solutions.
Thank you, Javier. Hannah, let me bring you in now, because we need to sort of open up this issue about citizenship. And if lifelong learning is part of active citizenship, but how do you integrate that in the concept of citizenship into adult lifelong learning, which many times is linked into transitions in employment? How do you get the next job, or how do you skill up so that you can get a better paying job? How do we bring in the active citizenship? Is it something that can be taught? We've heard it is actually as part of compulsory education, it's in the curriculum. But in the less formal situations, and when adults engage in the learning sector, and they may have a specific target, I want to get to learn these additional skills for my work. How do you bring in the active citizenship elements?
Thank you. Can citizenship be taught? I would say that the answer is yes, but let me clarify. And I think that very good points have already brought forth, for instance, that how broad this citizenship concept in general is. Firstly, we know that the projects of lifelong learning cover formal as well as informal learning processes at local, national, international levels and in all areas of social life, in civil society, work and people's private life spheres. Learning in adult education settings plays an essential but still only a partial role in creating preconditions for social membership and full attention to cultural diversity. And now we are talking about young people at risk of social exclusion and alienation. This is my point of view. The notion of active participatory citizenship can be explicitly designed in an educational strategy, but more often it is an implicit intention. With the exception of programs for newly arrived migrants and refugee groups, the majority of adult education courses do not demonstrate an explicit focus on citizenship, education, or related skills. However, different dimensions of active citizenship, we discerned economic, social, and political dimensions in our European-wide research, have characterized often implicitly adult education programs and initiatives across the studied countries. But there are significant divergences in the policies of effective adult education, enhancing active citizenship of vulnerable young adults. The ideals of active citizenship are attributed to the difference in the historical trajectories and contemporary local challenges of countries and regions. So there are significant differences. The concepts of active citizenship is used across the European countries with different aims, purposes, and interpretations. Rather than universally shared human values, it is policy agendas and country-specific priorities that define overall objectives and meanings of active citizenship and the role of education in general and adult education in particular. So I summarize and repeat to some extent, engaging vulnerable young people through adult education has been related to addressing specific problems such as poor literacy level or unemployment, defined by current national, political, social, or economic agendas, rather than target groups' own needs and rights for active participatory citizenship here and now. While some programs are specifically focused on citizenship, the concept itself remains often weakly explicated or embedded in other objectives of a given education.
Thank you. And just, I need to at this point pass on the apologies of Nika Kovac, who was going to join our panel, but unfortunately was unable to because of a sudden last minute change in her schedule. So unfortunately, she's not part of our conversation today. And we want you, the audience, to engage with us. I've got my coffee. Please feel free to do that. Share your ideas and your thoughts. You can also register for the remaining workshops that are happening later today and tomorrow. So this is more opportunities to engage. That's very much our theme. I wonder, Biljana, I'm going to come to you with, because when I was listening to Hannah, it was very clear to me that actually we've got two different approaches, that we have a policy goal of active citizenship because we want members of our society to play an active role in everything that makes our society function. So we want them to vote, we want them to pick up litter, we want them to, contribute to volunteering and play a role. So that's a public policy goal. Mm-hmm. Then there's also the idea of active citizenship having a benefit for the individual for themselves, mm-hmm. giving them a sense of agency and empowerment. So that perhaps the different approaches to citizenship have these two different perspectives. Biljana, what is the right balance there between, yes, it's a policy goal for active citizenship and inclusion, but it should also be something that offers real value and opportunity for the young people themselves. So it has to be a two-way street.
Mhm.
Do we have that right, that balance right?
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, first to say, yes, I think it's so important there's no one solution, as it's usually the case. I think that balance will depend again on the goals and why are we involving young people. And I said there can be other different reasons. It can be to support their development. It can be for efficiency, effectiveness, the policies, etc. So that's probably the starting point to think, why are we consulting young people, involving or consulting young people, sorry. And then we also have to think about the democratic environment that this consultation, this process is taking in place. Is it what kind of environment are we talking about? We also have to think about the different structures. Do we have youth advisory boards, youth organizations in place, some kind of sounding boards, etc. So this balance will be different, and I'm not sure that I don't think there is a one format that works. Nowadays as well, the digital medium is an excellent format. I mean, we see it, and there are more and more tools where young people are involved and they get to have their say. And of course, one of the advantages of this digital format is that even some young people who are maybe marginalized or who are not so much involved in these processes, or maybe live in remote areas, also have that access. I mean, we launched, for instance, this year, a youth voices platform where anyone can record a short message, an idea on one of the 8 policy topics of the European Year of Youth, and express their opinion, suggestion, what they think about this. And so this is quite in their own language. It's in 29 actually languages. And so I think this kind of also formats are important. But so in terms of the format, I don't think there is a right one. I will also have to say, like you said, I think in the previous session, young people are very, very diverse. I mean, the kind of definition of young that we use is 15 to 29, and there can be varying definitions. So of course, someone who's 15 versus someone who's 29, you can imagine what kind of difference. So there are many factors to keep in mind when we are engaging with young people and choosing the right format for the right reason.
Thank you. Hannah, maybe you could come in on this, because this, where these two different perspectives meet is in the classroom or the learning space. So the policy goal of ensuring that everyone understands their responsibilities and rights as a citizen, and then also the individual's desire to get the skills and the learning to allow them to achieve their life dreams. Both those things meet in that learning space. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you create a curriculum or teaching for active citizenship that meets both of those two key objectives.
Yes, well, yeah, difficult question as such, and you were asking about this balance. I definitely see the connection. They are not kind of alternatives or kind of different things. I see the connection with the policy goals of active citizenship and people's lives, and maybe for the latter ones, so it's good to remember that they are often very basic issues before even talking about voting or participating in decision making and processes. People, for instance, who have just entered this society, migrant people and so on. So it's very, very important to be sensitive to their needs and understand this citizenship in very broad terms. But yeah, and then of course the citizenship and the rights and duties, they are very, very society dependent. They are contextual. of course, they also come into play in designing these programs and so on. But somehow I'm not kind of expert in that respect totally. But I started to think when preparing this discussion that societies really are very different, and thinking of what is happening now in Europe in different countries. So what are the possibilities for in this case young people to express their citizenship and take their space and find if we talk about learning programs, so find programs that really respond to their needs, because that's the somehow the policies, it's the kind of the strong side of this designing these programs, but as also all the speakers today have pointed out, so openness to different needs. So
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Javier, I'd like to bring you in on a comment we received from the audience, because somebody has said, look, we need to raise awareness of the diversity of youth. We've heard it's not just an age bracket, because there's enormous differences between young people across Europe, and therefore the diversity of the issues they face. So young people may face different challenges if they're young women, young people with disabilities, LGBTQI, young activists, etc. So how do we make sure that we aren't just creating a box and saying those are all young people, they're all the same and they all have the same attitudes and they all watch the same TikTok videos? Javier, how do we make sure that we acknowledge the diversity of lived experience of young people, and that therefore their challenges or priorities would be different?
I think that's one important idea to find the solution is deepening democracy. Actually, we were talking about the widening citizenship, and actually this is an important issue if we think about mitigating the factors of social vulnerability and the factors that particularly affect young people. However, if we think of diversity, which is not only social vulnerability, which also has to do with many other social markers or social classifications as the LGBT community, or different diversity in language, religion, and many other aspects, it is clear to me that recognition is an important issue, but maybe it's not enough. I think that if we look at education, training, young people, and diversity through the perspective of deepening democracy, some other issues also come to the forefront. For instance, young people can tell us a lot about the diverging and converging understandings of what skills are, and how different institutions like labor education departments, employment departments, big corporations, and the small firms understand what the learning outcomes are and how they affect the skills. This is an issue where if they have a voice, they can really tell us a lot, and then we can learn a lot about how to create a kind of common ground where everybody can fit in. But because our understanding of skills, or the mainstream understanding of skills, is quite focused on employment and formal education, and we are all of us are aware that this has all implications for life-work balances and so on. But maybe young people could add something more to this conversation, reminding of the importance of life-work balances, but also reminding of the importance of aesthetic expression, or the involvement in sports, or the personal experience of participation and involvement in social movements. And so I think that if they have a say in this area, they can really make a great contribution.
Thank you. And Javier, you mentioned skills. Later this afternoon, our workshop will be on the skills revolution. So I know we'll be talking about that in more detail. Biljana, could you add in?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add on this diversity in the young people is that what I think is also important, and it's all right to point on this comment that we have to be aware of the different challenges. One thing that can help is if we have more data on the diverse perspectives. And for instance, this year, we have this EU Youth Dashboard. This is our way to measure certain indicators, to follow them in order to see progress and how the situation of young people is evolving. What we did this year, which was great, is that we managed to add 23 new indicators to this dashboard, and things like, for instance, well-being, which wasn't an indicator before, and also actually an indicator on youth participation, so that we actually can follow the situation, understand what is the state. But there as well, it is so important to enter to have this understanding of what about the different groups of young people. When we're talking, for instance, about youth unemployment, what about youth unemployment among migrant young people or any other situations? What about well-being for different groups of young people? So I think in terms of understanding the challenges for these different groups, this kind of follow up in terms of indicators and statistics and data is so important.
Thank you. I also think we should reflect the fact that perhaps the concept of citizenship is problematic, because for many migrants or people who've arrived, they don't have citizenship. They don't have the rights to it yet, or they're undocumented migrants who've got a significant number of people. So do you think that it's the right thing to do to call it active citizenship? Is there another word that somehow is more inclusive? Because if you don't have papers, and in many countries, if you don't have papers, you therefore don't have access to educational establishments. So I wonder who on the panel might want to pick up on this. Is active citizenship the most inclusive term that we can think of? Or is it problematic because it's linked to this agreement by the state about whether you're recognized as having rights and entitlements? Hannah, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Yeah, well, we carried out an extensive project European-wide, and as I mentioned, many kinds of vulnerable groups or people who are now living in vulnerable situations, and we were asking about this what it means to kind of become an active citizenship, and we could operate with this term, but this you were referring to, this discussion was going on, of course, but one kind of solution is to see the concept of citizenship in much broader terms. But you're right, there are very critical issues. Of course, some people can feel kind of bad of being asked about this, because they know that they have huge challenges in integrating in general into the new society and so on. Yeah, but I wouldn't give up this broader. Of course, then we can talk about agency and kind of finding own ways and expanding the kind of life spheres in new contexts.
Thank you. Biljana, do you want to add anything on the fact that, citizenship is both a legal concept recognized by states, but also the general term we use for being actively engaged in society, and how we make sure that it's, active citizenship is still a term that can be accessible to those who haven't yet had their personhood recognized? I think this is an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I would leave it more for the academics in terms of the really definition of the terminology. I mentioned just earlier, maybe what we, for instance, say and use is public participation, and I mentioned the festival on deliberative democracy. So, but the terminology, I would leave it for people who know better for this. I know that this is important for everyone, citizen or not, for many of the reasons I talked about, for them to feel part of society, for them to feel feel also included, for them to have the right to influence decisions that they will be impacted by. So maybe, yes, maybe it's a point to find a better terminology, but we have to keep explaining why it is important, why it is not only for the institutions, for this trust between institutions and people, but for the people themselves as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've got a couple of questions that have come in from our audience, and I'm going to start with the first question, if we could show that on the screen. This is a question looking about vulnerability and perhaps a comment about it. Somebody says, everyone is challenged in different ways. Can we imagine something on transgenerational learning that could help us recreate those broken relationships, particularly between generations? And I think this is a really interesting question. Javier, maybe I'll come to you to see if you could respond to this one.
Yes, I think that if we deepen democracy, we are creating an arena where people from different generations meet. So that's a way of doing that. However, we can also design some programs or some activities within programs where generations cooperate to improve education. Actually, I am running a program in which I invite old people to discuss some technical issues with higher education undergraduates in IT and business. And that experience is really rewarding for all of them, for both parties, because both of them leave their zone of comfort and both of them actually find out that they are learning not only about the issue, but also about the other people. So, and I think it's not so difficult to think of this kind of programs regarding or linking them, for instance, to learning cities or many other initiatives.
Thank you. We've also had a question that's coming in that's looking at the role of online activism. Let's see that question. And I think it's something that probably, Biljana, I'll be asking you to respond to that. Can online activism truly enhance our democracy, or is it just another media hype? This is a message from Marta. This sort of clicktivism, which is, yes, I've signed an online petition, and yes, I've put a like, and I've changed my profile on Facebook. Is that really a change for democracy, or is it just, another trend?
Yeah, I think we are quite early in the process to have, to make any conclusions of how effective it is. We know that this is a valid process for young people. Earlier this year, we did a Eurobarometer on youth and democracy. And when we asked young people, what do you think are the most effective ways to get engaged? Voting was still the number one. But I would say a very close second was this expression via social media and online, activism. So this falls into this unconventional kind of practices in participation. So it's valid and recognized. Then have the institutions caught up, and how are we taking these, online feedback and initiatives and suggestions, and what are we doing with that? This is still something new for us. But I mentioned the Conference on the Future of Europe, and it's one example where there was a digital platform where anyone could input their ideas, reports from meetings, etc. And I refer to you that next year the Commission will be working on a number of programs that are really coming from that platform. So I would say I see this part of the future. While it's in the early stages, it is taking place, but it's not a substitute for other formats. As well, in the conference we had citizen panels, so it is the people sitting together in a room and having these discussions, and the citizen panels will be continued in the future as well. So I think there is definitely a place for this online activism, and we have to see though how we react to it, how we give it feedback, and how we close the loop so that it doesn't just remain, like you said, some clicks and likes and things online.
Thank you. Hannah, let me invite you to share some perspectives from your research. What's the most effective way to engage and bring young people who are most at risk of social exclusion into programs for active citizenship? We've talked about that. In fact, there are some people who are effectively invisible because they don't exist for the state, they don't have papers, they're migrants. There are others who, Javier mentioned, dropped out of school early. What's the best way to create paths to bring them in to opportunities for active citizenship?
Okay, I maybe try to be kind of brief to let time for others also. So first of all, offering wide range of all kinds of programs and possibilities to learn is one key. Not in any case kind of one size fits for all, and and I also can say that based on our kind of findings, so young adults at risk of social exclusion have generally positive experiences related to recovering motivations and engagement. So when once they have participated, so that was a general idea. Contextualizing those dimensions of citizenship that we were discussing in ways that are relevant to adults. So that can be emphasized, contextualizing it not generalizing, and creating opportunities to exercise active citizenship in as a part of the education or learning programs and so on. That's important, and in young adults' experiences and personal situations. And of course, flexibility, personalization. This is all kind of supporting this kind of contextual view. But I also, this was also already discussed to some extent, that the significant role of the educational professionals in communicating with the young and mediating between their needs and social systems. So not only kind of addressing young, but being kind of mediators. I think that many adult educators recognize this role of becoming kind of acting far beyond the immediate educational task, helping in many ways, participating in these learners' situations, their family life, and such things. And then multiculturalism, gender issues, and those not to forget those. And we also then wanted to emphasize that initiatives that work well in one country may need adjustments when adopted in another, and we talk about this policy learning rather than policy borrowing is at stake. So these were kind of our summarizing points.
Yep. Thank you. Javier, let me come back to you just for our last few minutes to say, what are the key challenges of engaging young people in lifelong learning programs? You mentioned earlier second chance schools. So, what are the challenges that exist, perhaps the barriers, and what are the quick ways to overcome them? We heard a little bit from Hannah about contextualizing, about engaging with them, engaging with families and different cultural perspectives. But what's your secret sauce, your magic recipe for engaging with young people and bringing them into active learning programs?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a magic recipe, but let's try to figure out what it could be. I think that what Hannah's point is very important. Actually, there is a pedagogical issue. It's how bilingual education is designed and how the professionals think that they are educating. That's a very important issue. However, I think that that's not enough. We cannot think that education is only focused on what happens in some classrooms or in some groups of people who are teaching and learning together. We have to think of wider aspects, and that's very deep, that varies a lot depending on the countries. I mentioned second chance schools. Second chance schools play a very important role in countries like Spain or Italy, where early school living is very important, but for sure they are not so important in other countries. I also mentioned apprenticeships. That we can think of other countries. According to our research or our research program in which I participated a few years ago on young adults, there were some wider and more encompassing approaches in some Scandinavian countries, such as Finland, in which the whole life or the whole set of interests of your people was taken into account, or at least was taken more seriously. But I am also sure that actually adult education traditions are very diverse across Europe, and I think that I'm also sure that the more we share, the more we will learn that there are very promising approaches everywhere. In some Central and Eastern European countries, actually, there are also very interesting initiatives that can actually be telling for people from elsewhere. So I think that this besides the pedagogical issue, the debate on how we design policies is important. But let me just end by reminding that the legal barriers to newcomers, to immigrants, are an important issue. And if we don't bridge the gaps between education and training and the governance of migrations, actually we are creating a series of blind spots where many people cannot really engage in active citizenship.
Thank you. I think that's a very key message to end on, that if we don't address this properly, we will have a blind spot and we won't be taking into account the needs of a significant proportion of the people who are living in the territory of Europe, even if their citizenship isn't necessarily recognized. This is key. Biljana, I'd like to just give you one sentence to close our session, which is, you're the youth coordinator and this is the European Year of the Youth. So obviously you're busy this year. You probably have access to very senior parts of the Commission because this is the Year of the Youth. What do you hope will be the lasting legacy of the Year of Youth?
Well, this year, I think we are finding out also that what young people want is really participation, and I would say also connection. And this is also what we established together with the youth sector. I have to mention also, for these reasons that we were talking, inclusion and diversity, working with the youth organizations on the ground and the really in a bottom-up approach is very important. So what we established this year, I think this year allowed us to all work on these objectives. And I hope for the future, and I know that we will continue this relationship, this partnership with the youth sector, with the civil society sector, with member states, and really international institutions at large, and most importantly with the young people.
Excellent. I want to say a warm thank you to Biljana, to Javier, and to Hannah for joining us in this coffee and conversation about how to engage young people and offer active citizenship opportunities for them. It was really great, and it's a shame we couldn't have Nika with us. I'm sure she would have also added her perspectives. So thank you to this, and we are now going to be making our virtual travel, moving back to Finland to talk to our colleagues there. Let's find out how their morning has been and what they're going to do. Hello to Finland. Heini, hello.
Hello. Greetings from very sunny but cold Helsinki. My name is Heini Huhtinen. I work as the communication specialist at the Finnish Lifelong Learning Foundation, aka the KVS Foundation. And as part of my job, I also edit journalistic online media and all types of adult learning and education. It's called EPALE Magazine. So for that reason, I'm also watching all the panels at this conference with a particularly keen eye. And we actually organized a collective screening here at the KVS office yesterday. So we invited a bunch of people working in the adult education sector to join us, and we watched the discussions on learning communities together. And it was great that we were able to then continue the discussion with our own audience afterwards. It was actually, to me, and I feel for everyone else, it was actually a really nice concept. And I just wanted to, I guess, share just a few reflections from our discussions that I think also very much link to what was just discussed this morning as well. Because I feel like it was very clear that particularly the questions around how to learn to face difficult things together and how to learn, I guess, accept uncertainty and what can adult education do for that. Those were things that clearly resonated with many of us. And I found it particularly interesting that we also ended up talking about how to create and allow spaces for sharing difficult feelings. I feel that for many of us, we felt that, for adults, we might not have many communities where we could openly share and show a more difficult emotion such as anger or sadness. So that's definitely something I'll take away from our discussion. And thank you again for very, very fascinating discussions. I look forward to watching the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Heine. And it's really lovely to hear how you experienced the conference that we broadcast, and we know that lots of people are watching, but we have no idea how they use it and what they can take from it. So it was great to see that it was thought-provoking, and it allowed you, after you'd watched it together, to then talk about it and see how you applied it in your own work. So thank you very much to Heine. Let me now just remind you some of the things that we talked about and link it to what we discussed yesterday. So we talked yesterday about some of the challenges of how to deal with the perma crisis. We have a climate crisis, we've got war on the European continent, we've got an economic crisis, we've got the carbon transition, the digital transition, we've possibly got the cost of living crisis that's going on. We've got all of these things that all seem to be coming at the same time. And we heard yesterday how easy it is to be paralyzed by that, for people to be stuck in a position of fear. And we heard about how to bring hope from the future and put it to now to empower you to act, but also recognizing that, as we've just heard from Heine, how we handle difficult situations, that we move out of a situation of comfort to discomfort, and the ability to sit with discomfort for a while and work through it to transition to something else. And today we talked a little bit more about the role of active citizenship and the role of young people, their space in society, how much opportunity they have to actually really be engaged, or whether they are just a tokenistic, tick box exercise. We heard that young people are very diverse in their situations, their contexts, and their aspirations, and that we need to have a dialogue. Javier talked about deepening democracy, making sure that we multiply the opportunities and levels on which we can have these conversations, so that the active citizenship is both a process as well as a learning curricula and activity. We've been talking very much about making spaces inclusive. We talked about building a just society, and our keynote speaker this morning, Elida, said you start small and local, but you build a path to the world you want to see. And there will be setbacks. She shared her experience of being physically chased out of villages when she tried to bring forward issues that tackled taboos and stigma. But you still keep working and recognizing that the contributions you make build a society that is more just and more inclusive. We also recognize that not everyone is ready at the same time to listen to the voices of young people and to listen to a process of change. We discussed that a little bit yesterday when you had contested memories and new narratives that need to find very opposing different views, but finding a way forward. And these are all areas where adult education can play a role, because it's about opening up space, opening up opportunities. And we heard again about second chance schools, young people who've dropped out of school early, how we offer ways to bring them back in and opportunities to engage. So it's been a really wonderful day yesterday and today, and there's much more coming later today. We want still to hear from you. Please engage with us from a number of different ways. You can join the EPALE platform community. We've got 120,000 people already, but we have ambitions for many more. So please register on the platform. You can share your information if you use the hashtag #ImagineEPALE, and you can do that on Twitter or Facebook or elsewhere. And that allows us to follow the conversation. We want you to imagine a different, a better world that is more social and just and fair, but inclusive. We also have a survey, a user survey that's active on the EPALE website. It's currently only in English, but will be translated into all of the EPALE languages. And that's what we want to hear from you about, how you use the website, what content we put on, how it could be more useful for the way you want to integrate it in your work. And of course, a few questions about this conference and how you found that. So thank you very much for everyone for participating today. I hope you found it wonderful and exciting. We are coming back with a plenary session at 3 o'clock this afternoon, but the next activity is a workshop, which is called Speak Your Voice, Free Your Future. That starts in just a few minutes. And a reminder that we have workshops today and tomorrow that you still can register for and participate in. So thank you very much this morning to all of our speakers for sharing their insight and creating such thought-provoking ideas for us to take away. Thank you, and see you later.